North Atlantic Treaty Organization members get ready for Trump's with a vengeance return. A former senior NATO member told Newsweek that many in the organization's upper echelons fear that former President Donald Trump could be back with a vengeance. This suggests that NATO officials are playing a game of war about Trump's possible second term. The Republican frontrunner in the nomination race is continuing to rail against the 74-year-old alliance, focusing on its European members, as he races toward the November presidential election. "Listen, NATO has exploited our nation," Trump stated last week. The European countries took advantage. In response to a question regarding his plans to protect NATO member states while in power, Trump said, "Depends if they treat us properly." While Trump was in office, some NATO officials openly embraced this kind of criticism, saying that he was responsible for getting national leaders to agree on defense expenditure targets, even though some of those leaders resented being pressured by the White House. However, the bulk of the alliance members have failed to meet the 2014 goal of allocating 2% of GDP to military spending. Trump has already called NATO obsolete, and he has reportedly threatened to withdraw the United States from the alliance unless its other members quickly increase their military spending, so his most recent comments could be seen as worrying. The transatlantic alliance was in need of a boost before Russia's invasion of Ukraine rekindled such concerns. However, numerous members of NATO's ruling class are concerned that Trump has not yet rallied behind the transatlantic cause, in part because to Trump's repeated demands that Ukraine compromise with Russia and in part due to President Vladimir Putin's historic gamble. "There is probably the worry that this time Trump is going to be serious about pulling out," said Fabrice Pothier, a former director of strategic planning for NATO, speaking to Newsweek about the attitude among NATO leadership. "The United States system, including the Pentagon and Congress, essentially stymied his plans when he was in his first term." Moving on to other matters, such as the Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action nuclear agreement with Iran and others, he had to direct his destructive gaze elsewhere. This time, though, he may return with a vengeance. A Trump campaign spokesman has been emailed by Newsweek for comment. In a timely manner, Newsweek emailed NATO to solicit comment, but NATO did not answer. A major point of contention for Trump was the so-called burden sharing and the allies' persistent inability to reach the 2% of GDP goal for military spending that was agreed upon at the Wales summit in 2014. Then, by 2024, the alliance's top brass promised to have reached that mark. But most countries are falling short as the deadline approaches, even powerful ones like Italy, Turkey, France, and Germany. That's where the debate is really quite raw, and if Trump were to be re-elected, it will become even more difficult, said Pothier. The stats just aren't there yet, as he will see. Therefore, that discussion should continue well beyond the year 2024. NATO leaders tried to diffuse Trump's wrath during his first term by praising his administration for the upward trend in alliance spending, which began after Russia annexed Crimea in 2014 and continued after the alliance summit in Wales. During my visit to the Trump White House in 2018, Secretary General Jens Stoltenberg expressed his gratitude for the leadership you have shown on the issue of defense spending. "It is crucial that we all do our part to strengthen our shared security, and your words are being heard as allies are increasing their defense budgets," Stoltenberg said. NATO members also played to Trump's financial acumen by painting the increasing expenditure on the alliance as a potential windfall for American taxpayers. According to the former president, the United States makes by far the best military equipment in the world, the best jets, the best missiles, the best guns, the best everything. He made this statement in 2019 while pledging to assist weaker NATO states in purchasing American equipment. According to Pothier, Trump's allies may try to use the same strategy in a second term. NATO capitals may also propose adding more duties on the alliance's plate in order to relieve the White House of some of these burdens. In 2020, as part of his attempt to shift focus away from the Middle East, Trump himself proposed that NATO step up its involvement in the region. It shows that there is this thinking that if things are no longer prime U.S. national security interests, actually NATO can take care of them, said Pothier. transferring collective support for Ukraine from the US-led Ramstein arrangement to in-house at NATO is one example of how I think some of the NATO officials will try to convince him that's fine. He added, "Farewell, everything. If Trump really does withdraw from NATO, it will be the end of NATO as we know it." Members of his inner circle, including then National Security Advisor John Bolton, then Secretary of State Mike Pompeo, and then Defense Secretary Jim Mattis, reportedly dissuaded Trump from taking this action during his first term. There is this concern that this time he might mean it, and not only that he might mean it, but that he might do it, said Pothier. This is obviously a far-fetched scenario, but I think NATO's most senior officials will still have this in the back of their minds. The public anticipates a more self-assured, less retrained, and more driven Trump in his second term to mold the executive branch and other institutions to his liking. Despite his campaign rhetoric in 2016, Trump first surrounded himself with powerful establishment figures who were firmly dedicated to maintaining the US-created international order. Now things could be different. The assumption is that those people aren't going to be around this time, Michael Allen told Newsweek, referring to his tenure as a senior director at the National Security Council and special assistant to President George W. Bush. "We have no idea how close the president came to wanting to get out," said Allen, who is now the managing director of the Beacon Global Strategy strategic consultancy business. Pompeo, Bolton, and others have privately told People since they left this statement. "I'm not so sure he won't try it again if he wins. I think there's all sorts of people in the Congress and others who try to thwart an effort by Trump," stated Allen. "But nonetheless, there's going to be fewer internal institutional hurdles, I believe, if Trump were to win a second term. Not even Trump is immune to the influence of larger tendencies." According to Charles Kupchan, a senior fellow at the Council on Foreign Relations, who spoke with Newsweek, a new strategic reality in Europe would be one of the challenges that a second term of Trump would encounter. Europe has been geopolitically redivided, and even if Trump were to cut some kind of deal with Putin on Ukraine, I think that Europe is for the foreseeable future going to be a central theater for the Pentagon and for American force planning, said Kupchan. There will be no quick withdrawal of the United States soldiers stationed in Europe since February 2022. Trump, in the end, is just a politician. Both the Republican and Democratic parties strongly back NATO. So, I can picture him resuming his practice of scolding friends for not spending enough, but I fail to understand the political benefits of his decision to resign from the alliance. Awakening in Europe contact. The while Trump has always had issues with NATO, he has been far more aggressive in voicing them than his predecessors. Washington, where many lawmakers view Europe as a place of yesterday's conflicts, has been under increasing pressure from successive U.S. administrations to raise military spending by its European partners. James Rogers, co-founder of the UK-based Council on Geostrategy think tank, told Newsweek that there is a growing movement of individuals who are extremely interested in China's development and evolution. These people are arguing that the United States should actually deprioritize its efforts in Europe. Robert Gates, who was the defense secretary at the time, attempted to sound the alarm as far back as 2011. If current trends in the decline of European defense capabilities are not halted and reversed, future U.S. political leaders, those for whom the Cold War was not the formative experience that it was for me, may not consider the return on America's investment in NATO worth the cost. According to him, people have only partially paid attention to what Gates said. A new generation is coming, and they are animated by a different set of assumptions and beliefs, stated Rogers. We in Europe can't say we were unaware of it, or we didn't see it, or just blame it all on the very mercurial character of Donald Trump. We appear to be avoiding the issue, possibly on purpose, since we are unwilling to face the potential costs associated with its implications. Despite Trump's characteristically aggressive delivery, much of his foreign policy throughout his first term was based on long-term patterns. The process continued under Trump, but he didn't start it. He was picking up where Obama left off, said Kupchan, while acknowledging that Trump shown much less tactful in how he twisted arms. Kupchan emphasized that this is a bipartisan issue, not a Trump issue.